Okay. Kate, let's begin, shall we?
Sounds good.
Great. Welcome, everyone. We're so pleased that you're taking some time on your Friday afternoon to join us prior to Luxury Week beginning over the weekend and sales happening next week. I'm Shane David Hall. I'm the director of the Fine Art Group's High Profile Division. And for those of you who are not familiar with our firm, we are the world's largest and most trusted fine art and collectible asset appraisal and advisory firm. We support collectors through every part of the market, including appraisal, advisory or acquisition, sales, lending, and investment. But we pride ourselves on being thought leaders and educators in what is oftentimes an opaque marketplace. Today, I'm joined by my fabulous colleague, Kate Waterhouse, who has continually worked in the luxury industry for over 18 years. Kate graduated with a BA from Elizabethtown College, and she attended the Sotheby's Institute of Art in London, where she worked towards an MA in art business. Kate holds a deep luxury jewelry market insight and has served at 4 international auction houses, including Sotheby's, where she was assistant vice president and specialist in their magnificent jewels department, and Hindman, where she oversaw the Southeastern region as vice president of business development. But most recently, Kate joined the Fine Art Group, where she now serves as our senior specialist and director of our fine jewelry department, overseeing both jewelry appraisals, as well as assisting clients to navigate, grow, and curate their personal collections, certainly in moments of accession and deaccession when clients are buying and selling. Kate has been featured as a specialist on the famed in the PBS Antiques Roadshow, as well as the NBC Today show. And so with that, we'll get started here. Kate, would you maybe give us a view of what the jewelry market looks like a 30,000-foot view? What's happening today?
It's a very steady place to start. I would say it was an interesting fall, and you will probably hear that echoed in the media as well. The end of 2022 for jewelry and watches felt tenuous for a number of reasons. One, I think we were all just trying to figure out what was happening as COVID kind of came to a close and we were opening up internationally in other markets. But also, I think that, with Russian diamond sanctions being the way they were, I think there was just everything came to a head all at once. And after having been so successful in previous sales of 2022 and 2021 for the auction houses, there also had been this moment of, I think we had gotten a bit ahead of ourselves in terms of auction estimates. We were seeing results and thus raising estimates. And there were some surprises. There were some unsolds that were a bit of a disappointment. But there were also some very bright spots. So it just felt, I think, I would describe as a bit spotty at the end of 2022. It did give us a nice chance for a gut check, however, across the board. We all had a moment where we kind of reevaluated where auction estimates should be, what we're looking at in terms of prices realized potentially for the spring sale season. And so I think we all adjusted accordingly. And the spring sales have been much more consistent across the board. Many of the firms, I would say most of the firms, have had very strong sell-through rates, well within high 80%, if not well above 90% sell-through rates. As an example, I know that Sotheby's Geneva had one of their highest totaling sales to date. I think in the last 5 years, it is the highest grossing sale at Sotheby's Geneva for magnificent and noble jewels, which was very exciting and featured that incredible blue Bulgari diamond that was so incredibly exciting. So I think where we were 6 months ago is not how I necessarily feel today. I think we're feeling all much better, a lot more comfortable. And the results from Hong Kong sales and Geneva sales have been fantastic. What we are still seeing is very strong participation from the US markets. I think Christie's was quoted as getting 38% of their Geneva Magnificent Noble Jewels sales bidders from the US. I think 34% came from Europe, and the remaining came from seemingly Asia Pacific. So those buying centrals are still active and still participating. And I know, of course, as Hong Kong has opened up and Asia has opened up again, that just continues to become more comfortable for everybody. What is most interesting about this end of the market. And what we're starting to see, and a new trend that I'm enthusiastic about, is the rise of the next generation collector. So the children whose grandmothers and grandfathers were collecting, maybe mom and dad didn't as baby boomers, maybe they did, but it's this kind of age group between, I would say, late 20s to all the way up into the early 50s, who are kind of starting to collect in a really wonderfully voracious way and exploring outside of just the retail markets, which is nice to see. So they're starting to kind of dip into the process of buying at Sotheby's or Christie's or Phillips or Bonhams, and that it's important to them to be able to explore collections that might be a little different than what's available in the retail market today. Pieces that may no longer be offered by a specific firm may come available at auction because, as an example, in the image you see at the bottom of the slide here, this is not necessarily a piece that Bulgari is currently creating. This is a legacy piece. This would have been from one of their vintage collections, and you're only going to be able to find that on the secondary market, to my knowledge, as of right now. Hopefully they'll bring it back because it is a truly, truly stunning look.
It is stunning.
And this is really what the next gen is asking for.
In terms of next gen, I know we're looking at this great wealth transfer that's happening between older generations and younger generations. And would you predict that the trend would continue? Will the market grow as we move into the future? Certainly with next gen buyers, maybe pushing the market forward?
I would really like to see that. What we're seeing right now, and please keep in mind, this is across Christie, Sotheby's, Phillips. This also, I believe, takes into consideration the retail market as well. But we are seeing year-on-year growth. What's different and what we have to take into our minds is that there are life cycles in jewelry and fashion. In a way that does kind of mirror the fine art market. I would completely agree with that. But within these life cycles, you'll see, white diamonds are up, yellow diamonds are down. Yellow diamonds are up, white diamonds are down. Sign jewels are strong, but not necessarily for, and I'm just pulling something out of thin air, Art Deco. The reality is Art Deco is still very strong today, but there are moments where an Art Deco diamond strap bracelet just doesn't hold the same excitement, say, as a piece of David Webb jewelry from the 1970s that's big and sexy and opulent and kind of sensuous. So what we will see is, yes, there will be continued growth, in my opinion, but it will be thoughtful and it will have a life cycle to it.
And, certainly in the last few years with trends in the market, we've seen this rise of the single owner sale. How does, how does provenance for like a collection like Anne Eisenhower's that's being offered next week via Christie's, how does that impact value?
It quite a bit, frankly. Sometimes upwards of 10% on the hammer price, sometimes as much as 30% or more, depending on the previous owner. And certain collections will garner a higher premium for the name. I give you an example of the Duchess of Windsor or Elizabeth Taylor. Those are incredibly exciting names. They're accessible, people understand them. You then have single owner sales that are just truly jewelry connoisseurs, in addition to being a celebrity factor. So Anne Eisenhower is going to come underneath that umbrella. She's both, frankly. And then you have collectors who were just incredible collectors, but we may not know them as a celebrity per se. They were just incredible collectors in their own right. So I think that there's different ways to look at a single owner sale. They are always exciting. It's always an intimate view into somebody else's collecting process. Absolutely. Truly, especially because it's jewelry in this instance, so it was worn. And there have been a tranche of very exciting single owner sales that have come up at auction just this spring alone. You think about the Wolf collection at Sotheby's, which was just, I think, the most exquisite Van Cleef & Arpels mystery set jewelry that has come to market in a while. It truly, truly beautiful pieces, and was a white glove sale, which was very exciting for them, I'm sure. And then you have, suite like the Ultimate Jewel Box that went to Bonhams this past spring that had an unbelievable sell-through rate with a number of pieces going well above their high-end auction estimates. And then obviously the Heidi Horton sale, now followed by Anne Eisenhower. There are important collections both within Sotheby's and Christie's various owner sales, which is exciting. I know that Sotheby's has Melon Jewels coming up. But when we're bidding, we just need to be conscious of not getting necessarily carried away unless you're willing to own that piece for life, because you do have different bidders at a single owner sale than you may at a various owner sale. You have the collectors who are buying, they're there for the jewelry no matter who owned it, and then you have the people who are there for the jewelry and the celebrity factor or the single owner sale factor. Excuse me. And then you also have those that are bidding solely for the celebrity factor alone, or the single owner sale factor alone. And so it's the extra competition that one might want to take into consideration when participating.
I think provenance is always so important, and certainly when you compound that with a collection like the Wolf Sale from Sotheby's, is there, those collectors are often looking at other portions of the market for criteria, let's say. Is there, are there criteria or certain aspects of the market that you look at to determine value?
Absolutely, and not terribly dissimilar to fine art. So for those who are collecting in fine art, we look at condition, we look at the maker, we look at the subject. We're doing the same in jewelry without realizing that we're doing it. So here we have an example of a piece that's coming up at Sotheby's in their June 8th sale. This is part of a larger collection of rather important Cartier Panther jewelry for them. It's a nice example because it's so wearable, even though it's such an opulent piece. But when we're looking at a piece like this, how many of these boxes are we checking? Is it by a major maker? Yes, Cartier. Is it by one of their important lines? Yes, Panther. And Panther is important because it was originally conceived of, I think, in around 1900. The original designer actually was on safari with Cartier himself, and was so taken with the movement and sensuousness of this animal that she really wanted to be able to create it into a piece of jewelry that was wearable. The first actual piece wasn't made until 1948, and it was actually for the Duchess of Windsor. And I think it's a Cartier Panther astride a very large beryl or an emerald, if I'm not mistaken, cabochon. So you have the history there as well. You have this incredible legacy of this is an important line that has a storied history. In this instance, the provenance is very good. It's coming from a private collection. There are extensive literature opportunities when it comes to the Panther line, specifically this line as well. It's been discussed again and again and again. But then we also have the fact that it is a bracelet. And we take into consideration the wearability of a piece and how are we putting it into our daily lives. This bracelet happens to sit really beautifully right on top of the wrist. If sized correctly, it shouldn't swing around like some bangle bracelets can. It really should sit atop your wrist really nicely. But it comes with, there are brooches, there are earrings, there are rings, there are necklaces. And what does that look like in our daily lives? We would say that in what I typically counsel clients on fairly regularly is there is a hierarchy of jewelry, and earrings are at the top. You then have bracelets and necklaces and rings kind of all in the middle. And then you have the brooch at the bottom. And it's not that I don't love the brooch, it's just the wearability is more modest. We've all tried to bring the brooch back, and there are people who do enjoy a good brooch. But typically the fabrics that we're wearing in our day-to-day lives don't necessarily allow for us to enjoy these very heavy opulent brooches that we can see. And then it's a question of, that's fine, but are we looking at that piece of jewelry then becoming an objet de vertu that we enjoy as a beautiful object in addition to a piece of jewelry or not? And how are we utilizing that? So wearability is something that isn't listed on here necessarily, but something to take into consideration for sure.
I'd certainly not considered that. I mean, the difference between a performance fabric and a Chanel boucle suit is the difference in wearing a very heavy brooch, isn't it?
Exactly.
So
yeah,
that's very interesting. Let's circle back to provenance just quickly. I mean, you mentioned Duchess of Windsor. Is there anything of the similar caliber coming up in next week's luxury sessions that you would consider to be extremely important from a provenance perspective?
Absolutely. This is, I think, and I've added this because it is the most stunning example, frankly, of jewelry that would have come out of Van Cleef & Arpels. This is a storied piece from Van Cleef's archives. It was created for Marlene Dietrich, so it has that provenance. It is a really wonderful time for their creation and their manufacturing of. It wasn't quite Deco period and it wasn't full retro, and you can see that it has smackings of both, which I really love. It is Burmese unheated rubies. There was a test done with the American Gemological Laboratory to determine that the majority of the rubies were actually Burmese, which is important, and it's good to have that confirmation. But what you don't see in this slide, and what we couldn't include, was the laundry list of places that this piece has been exhibited, or the number of times it has been written about. During Dietrich's lifetime alone, she wore it to the Oscars in 1951. She actually wears it during Stage Fright, an Alfred Hitchcock film, so you actually would see it in the film. She was photographed in it regularly. It was truly a favorite piece of the actress. And then in addition to, I remember seeing this piece on exhibition in the Cooper Hewitt Museum when they had their big Van Cleef exhibition, I think in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. It's just one of those pieces that if you are creating a jewelry collection to be all jewelry collections, this is your crown piece, or one of your crown pieces.
Iconic.
It's really that impressive. And the fact that it's coming not only from Marlene Dietrich's collection to Anne Heisenhauer's collection, then to yours is also very special. So now it has even more provenance. That's terribly exciting.
So kind of talking about design and how design impacts value, is there an intersection there that we can kind of discuss with our viewers today?
Absolutely. And I know that we're talking about Luxury Week in general, and I'll have a chance to speak a little bit about handbags and watches in a little bit later down. But for those of us who are art collectors who may be sitting in on this meeting, I really wanted to focus on design and an art aesthetic and artists who were creating in their own space. And this happens to be a very strong season for jewelry by artists and or those who I would consider designers who were also artists in their own right. Two of those being Belperron and Boivin. And you see pieces coming up at both Phillips as well as Christie's in this slide, but you also have pieces that are coming up at Sotheby's as well. I can say confidently, if I saw these pieces and didn't know the maker by sight, I would assume that any of these pieces could have been made in the last 10 years or the last 30 years, and I wouldn't necessarily know. I could say that the one on the far right, the citrine and yellow gold bracelet, could have easily have come from 1987 as it could from 1940. And I think what it comes down to is just good design is timeless. And these were true artists beyond just being associated to the jewel or the gem. They really went above and beyond. These pieces are typically very comfortable to wear. I would say very happily I would own the cabochon sapphire bracelet on the left very, very happily in my collection if I had the chance, because I just think that it's so wearable and so easy. And then you have a name that you can carry through to the end of time. These are makers and they are artists, and they are collected rather voraciously by collectors who know this work and are passionate about this work.
And I don't think we can talk about jewelry designers without mentioning Jar. I mean, one of the preeminent designers of the 20th century.
He's wonderful. So Jar and the jewelry that he has created has had a bit of a high season, frankly, at the auction houses. You will see pieces coming up at Sotheby's, Christie's, and Phillips this coming week, ranging from the truly magnificent and opulent, which you will see here in that beautiful hard stone sapphire ring, as well as down in those diamond earrings. He's very high design. They tend to be very sculptural, but still very, very wearable. What you see on the other side of the screen in these big, beautiful blossom earrings are what I would consider to be the more affordable end of what he would have created. Everything is massive. So when you're looking at it on the auction catalog or online, do keep in mind that these are meant to truly take up some significant real estate on the ear, as you can see here. I wanted to make sure we showed them being worn, but they're so light and they're so wearable. And he did such a wonderful job creating drama without all of the excess necessarily. I mentioned, I think I may have mentioned, I live in Palm Beach. The palm fronds to me would be perfect for a tropical destination, or if you're living where you might see palm trees on a regular basis, you could then tie it back to home and then it feels special. But they're very collectible and very, very wearable. And this is just a minor subsection.
And it's interesting because we mentioned fashion earlier, but I think from a collector's standpoint, unless you're terribly invested in the jewelry market, some collectors may not be aware that there's a intersection between high fashion houses and high jewelry with a very collectible market as well.
Absolutely. And what's interesting between the previous slide and Jarre's work, as well as Victoire de Castellane, who created both of these ear clips, is that they have both been exhibited. They have gone to major museums. Victoire de Castellane, I believe, has been shown in Paris, New York, at Gagosian in New York, Tokyo and Beijing. And obviously, most of us remember Jarre's retrospective or exhibition at the Met, which was very exciting. So both of these artists are truly artists and are considered to be of that capacity. What's interesting about these ear clips for Victoire's work is that they were based around the Versailles aesthetic, where Dior has done a number of shows in the past. And she was very much inspired by this heavy Rococo look. The diamond only ear clips that you see are actually mosaic diamond, and they have been patchworked together to create what looks like broken ice. It's truly spectacular. The rest of the collection has a very similar look. We unfortunately only get to see the earrings this time, but I would kill to see the necklace someday if somebody has it. I would love to get a chance to spend some time with it. The Paraiba tourmaline sapphire and diamond earrings were 2017 collection. And again, very specifically part of the Palace Versailles. I believe this was a 60-piece collection for her work. When she works on her own, she works in these truly fantastical, bright colors, very, very bright gem work. And you'll see that in these Paraiba tourmalines that really kind of glow. They're really beautiful in person, as well as they photograph like a dream, which is nice to see. But these ones I actually have gotten a chance to see in person.
I think so interestingly, the shapes, the silhouette of both set of ear clips here really mimic the silhouette of some of Dior's more traditional couture, if you will.
Exactly.
Kind of sculptural aesthetic. Lovely.
And the
really
size
lovely.
is not necessarily readily shown here, and I apologize for that, but they are huge. Each one is a couple of inches. So they're very dramatic in real life as well. They're not shrinking violets for sure.
So I've got to ask, my mother, certainly a product of the 80s with the jewelry to match, what's happening in a vintage marketplace?
Exactly. So again, this is where the next gen is seemingly enthusiastic. I know I am. This is how I grew up as well, Shane. So don't feel shy. And there's something to be said for some of these makers, and not that their current work isn't spectacular, but there is something about this look right now in the marketplace that is very exciting. Signed jewelry by Van Cleef and our pals in Cartier and Bulgari and Tiffany is always very sexy, but these look and feel so good. If you have the chance to go to the New York exhibition, I highly recommend doing so, or taking a look online and just seeing how these pieces lie on the neck when you're looking at them. They look comfortable, and they really are. They're very, very heavy, obviously, because you have quite a bit of gold weight and certainly quite a bit of diamond weight in each one of these pieces. But they feel almost like a $40,000 weighted blanket, frankly. You take them off and you kind of feel like, oh gosh, I wish I, didn't have to, because they're just that comfortable. And design wise, speak to a very specific time and very specific period that we're happy to see them come back, and we're happy to see them have a bit of a renaissance in their own right.
Age of excess.
Exactly.
What about art and jewelry? Do art and jewelry intersect with one another?
They do intersect with one another. So I wanted to give a break between all of the designer and artist jewelry, and then kind of bring up Salvador Dali. So this is a piece that is coming up at Christie's, and I am actually a huge fan of Dali's work in the jewel sector. He worked with a firm called Almany and Ertmann that was very, very positive. You may recognize pieces having come to sale before at Sotheby's and Christie's and other firms, where you have beautiful dripping earphones, ear receivers from a normal phone, pre-mobile phone, or the Wing collection that he created. But this is above and beyond all of that. This is truly a piece of artwork. And it's a really interesting conversation. I know you and I were having it the other day of, when is it when is it objet de vertu and when is it wearable? And this actually could be wearable. I haven't had a chance to touch it and hold it in person and see how heavy it is, but I'm sure that it would look really beautiful on the shoulder as a brooch. I love that Christie's is selling it alongside the original gouache. I think that that is spectacular. And not unlike the Marlene Dietrich lot that's coming up from Anne Eisenhower's collection, this has a provenance list and an essay that is just, it feels like it's a mile long, but it has been exhibited beautifully. It has been written about countless times, which is so nice to see. I love that it comes with its original design. I'm intrigued that it's being sold in a jewelry sale, because the example that you have here of his dripping eye, I remember when this went to sale at Sotheby's, and it went to sale in an Imps and Mod sale, an Impressionist and Modern sale. And it did not go to the jewelry department. And it did really beautifully where it was. So it was nice to see it bring the price it should have. That piece was specifically, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar, but it was actually a watch that you could wind, and the eye is the watch mechanism. So it was just an incredible piece. But this eye, the starfish, is not unlike the lips that we've seen come up with the pearl teeth. And I just think what he created was really special, and does feel like art when you're in front of it in the moment. It has a really wonderful sculptural standpoint, and it would be an interesting addition to a collection.
Well, you know, I'll jokingly say that it feels like a bargain at 1 to 1.5, simply because there's two for the price of one here. You have the starfish brooch with the companion butterfly above. These could be broken down and worn independently or together, mix and match.
Exactly.
Fun.
It's special.
Really fun. So I think, you know, we all talk about colored diamonds and how important they are in the market. Can you give us some insight there? What's taking place in that kind of sub-market of the jewelry space?
So this is an interesting area. I'll start with what's not being pictured here, but I will say, again, when we're talking about life cycles, the yellow market, not pictured here, is particularly happy at the moment. We are seeing a bit of a renaissance there as well. It's nice to see an appreciation for yellow diamonds of all various hues, colors, clarities, come back into style and be more consistent at sale. There was a period of time when we were feeling a little soft. And that's, you know, in some years putting it nicely, but I think we're kind of starting to see the crest on that, you know, end of the market happen again. What we have here is there are a number of pinks that are coming up to sale, all of, again, various colors, and then of course auction estimates associated to color that you'll see. The Eternal Pink, I am so enthusiastic about having a chance to review when I'm in New York. I've heard rave reviews from those who have seen it already, and they say it is just an absolutely beautiful stone, and that it's happy and it wants to play when it's on the finger, and it you know, ticks all the boxes, so to speak. We also have a very pretty, and I liked it because you have the blue on either side to break up the pink, blue and pink diamond ring on the other side that I find to be very charming. That's coming up at Christie's. Something to keep in mind when we're talking about the colored diamond market is I'm an enthusiast about having a client who's interested in a colored diamond. If they can see it in person, see it in person. It's not always possible. And we try to do our best to explain what the color looks like, but you do have crossover colors. And there have been a number recently of violetish blue or bluish violet or greenish blue, orangey pink. And those are the diamonds that play a little differently in real life. They may look different in different lighting. You know, a straight fancy blue could actually look rather light blue in certain lighting. You could have an orangey pink that plays as very pink in some lighting and skews more sunset orange in others. So I do think when we're looking at, you know, discussing this market and adding to our own collections, I would love to, you know, give all of the assistance I can if I've seen the piece in person. But if you can see it in person yourself, I'm a huge proponent of that. I will say the market overall for pinks, blues, yellows is feeling more stable and a little happier. We have seen some really nice results. Obviously, the December sales had some very nice results in and of its own right. But just this spring alone, we had Sotheby's Bulgari Blue come through sale. And I believe that made $25.2 million. which was wonderful. And that was a spectacular stone. And then you also had the fancy vivid blue that came up at Christie's, the pear shape, just recently in Hong Kong, and that did 8.8 million US. And that was also it was a kind of a thinner outline for a pear shape. So it was a little leaner, but it was just incredible color. It just kind of popped through everything that you saw it advertised in and everywhere you read about it. So I think that those are markets that will continue to grow. Again, life cycles will happen. But I want to make sure that with all that's on the market, these are actually rare, because I know sometimes it can feel when we're seeing so much of it in every auction cycle now, it may feel like it's not. It is. These are rare stones. And there are colored gemstones as well when we're talking about sapphires and rubies and emeralds. And then some of the collector stones like Paraiba tourmalines, which we were talking about a little or speaking about a little earlier in the Dior ear clips. You know, there are stones where there is less of a following, but it's gaining following quickly. And color seems to be very exciting right now across the board for so many collectors.
Well, I know we're coming up against time, and I'm sure people are ready to begin their weekends. Any final thoughts you can share with our viewers today?
Absolutely. I would say that the luxury week overall is looking really beautiful. And I didn't even get a chance to hit on watches, which is very strong across all three auction houses this week. And then you have the Paul Newman collection that's coming up at Sotheby's, which is incredibly exciting. Yes, it needed to be said. Also a single owner sale. So that will be incredibly fun to watch. And then, of course, the luxury accessories, buying and looking at bidding in June rather than before the holidays, you may find that you have more success this time of year if you were interested in dabbling in the luxury accessories market, which means handbags and sneakers and whatnot. But I would say no matter what we're looking at, you want to take the time to educate your eye. It's important. You want to take the time to seek advice. So when you're going to an exhibition, if you have the chance to do it, please do. The specialists there are wonderful, and they do want to show you things. I know so many times women need to be encouraged to ask to see something out of the case. The exhibition staff are there because they want to show you that piece of jewelry or that watch out of the case. And then they do want to speak to you about it. So if you have the chance to grab the ear of a specialist at Sotheby's, Christie's, Bonham's, Phillips, Hyman, wherever, do ask them their thoughts, because they will give you their thoughts. They're honest, and they really do want you to know more about the piece and why they're excited about it, or maybe, you know, why they are feeling a little apprehensive. Arm yourself with that information and kind of take it with you as you see fit. We are here. I am always happy to discuss pieces with clients if they have further interest in learning more or having another set of eyes on something. I'm happy to be the backup and take another look. That's always a possibility. Understanding the historical context is also important. When we're again talking about jewelry trends, you know, where was the Art Deco market versus the Art Nouveau market versus the 1980s? Right now, we see that kind of historical context in bidding, and how are we taking that forward as we bid? Are we bidding at the height of a market? Are we bidding kind of at the beginning of the height of the market? Are we bidding when things when the market is a little softer and we're finding some pretty spectacular deals? And then buy what you like. I don't think we can say this enough. I know we say it in other collecting categories at the Fine Art Group, but you may be wearing this and you may actually be living with it on your person. And you want to feel comfortable in that piece. If it doesn't speak to you and it's not just an investment, just keep that in mind. Because once it's on, those ear clips, if they're pinching, you may want to keep that in the back of your mind, because it means that you won't wear it and it won't be taken out, and those sorts of conversations need to kind of happen in the back of your mind as you're looking, and you may own it for a while. We say in, you know, my end of the market, I like to counsel clients that they're typically into jewelry for 5 to 10 years max. It's a little like real estate in that capacity. It doesn't necessarily, or was not moving as fast as a market that, you know, fine art or contemporary art was, but now we're starting to see a big pickup there, and that's been echoed across all of the auction houses. But buy what you like. And then finally, don't catch auction fever. This is a Shane Hall-ism that I liked, and I stole from you, Shane. But it's so true. I am someone who is not allowed to have a paddle in the room because I know that I have a hard time putting the paddle down. So sometimes counsel is really helpful, just to know really where the market was, where the market is. I have a wonderful example of, in the past, I would be in the sales room specifically. I remember sitting in the Sotheby sales room phone bidding for a client, and someone next to me was phone bidding with a client who wanted to buy a Van Cleef and Arpels Alhambra necklace, which is a beautiful piece, and so wearable and so collectible. And at the end of the day, when the hammer went down, the client had paid more than she would have or he would have if he had just gone into Van Cleef and Arpels and bought out of the boutique straight, because we got a little carried away during the bidding process. That with buyer's premium and tax on the hammer price, we actually could have said, well, you can just walk down the street and walk into Van Cleef and Arpels and buy one straight out of the case, essentially. So those moments happen, and we're happy to help, alleviate some of that on behalf of clients, or give you a context so you know where the benchmarks lie.
Exactly. I think that's, engaging in the auction market is oftentimes understanding value is the most important thing in my mind, and having that benchmark or that threshold of where the retail market begins is certainly helpful for many buyers. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We certainly appreciate your time. Kate is certainly at your service. She will be in New York throughout the previews and into next week. Thank you again for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.